Joining us right now via Zoom chat and from Rome, praise be to Jesus, is Mr. Julio Laredo from TFP, Tradition, Family, and Property. Good morning to you, sir.
Good morning to you, Joe. Good morning to everybody.
It's good to be, we're glad to have you here. We're very excited that you're able to join us today. You gave a great talk recently to the American TFP Student Action on Russia and Fatima. I was really I enjoyed that talk quite a bit. Maybe Adrian can share it in our chat today. Let's talk about Russia. You know, over the last 3 days, Adrian and I were on retreat, and the priest there, a longtime friend of mine, used to be a missionary in Russia and in Ukraine. And I was asking about his experiences there, specifically about the Russian people, how religious they are, because part of the argument goes, Vladimir Putin is the great crusader to save the culture against the debauchery of the West, and you addressed this in your talk. Can we start with that? Tell us, what is the Russian culture like today?
Well, I know Russia very well. I've been there many times. We even have an office as TFP. We have an office in Moscow right now. It's sort of not closed down, but practically, you can understand that. But anyway, the Russian people, on one side, they like authority. They've liked it since the times of the Tsars. So it's no secret and no surprise that they would like a strong leader like Vladimir Putin. So when we attack him as being a dictator, as being authoritarian, that's honey for the average Russian. Now, is the moral ambience in Russia better or worse than other parts of the world? It's worse than many parts of the world. I can tell you that. For example, the frequency to church service is much lower than the frequency to church service in Poland, in Hungary, Slovakia, Baltic countries, and so on. Then it has the highest rate of abortion in the world. It's diminishing, but abortion is part of the mentality of the Russian people, so embedded it is in their culture. You would say, well, they oppose homosexuality. Yes and no. Yes, in the sense that homosexual publicity, propaganda for minors is outlawed. Now, homosexuality as such is not outlawed. You can find homosexual bars and these sinful places very, very openly. How do you call it in the United States? Surrogate motherhood is legal and free in Russia. There is a law in the Duma, in Congress, trying to restrict this surrogate motherhood to just residents in Russia. But you see, it's not a moral problem; it's a populational problem. Immorality in the straight, let's say, way, in the natural way, is rampant. Prostitution is illegal, but it's absolutely public and rampant. Spirituality, the Russian spirituality is very peculiar, and this we have to understand. Because of the union between church and state, Russians see the church as the mystic aspect of the state, and the state as the political aspect of the church. So those ceremonies that gather thousands of people are mostly patriotic ceremonies. For example, the yearly procession in honor of Saint Alexander Nevsky, the one who defeated the Germans in 14, I don't know what, and therefore founded modern Russia. It's huge. Now go to church just to pray. They're just a handful of babushkas praying in front of the icons and lighting those thin candles that they use. So,
sounds like a lot of churches in America too. Just all the moms and the ladies going to mass. Where are all the men?
Exactly. I just read in these days, because we're speaking a lot about Russia. I read the numbers. I don't remember them offhand, but the frequency to church in Russia is comparable to the frequency to church in any European country.
Wow.
It's not more, no less. So to present Russia as a paladin, a paradigm of moral or moral values is, to say the least, misleading. Just yesterday or the day before, 2 days ago, there was a very interesting interview by this Russian philosopher, very influential in the Putin government, Alexander Dugin, who, by the way, he's a Gnostic. He's very close to the occultist Julius Evola, etc., etc. It's a person not to reckon with. But he says, we are in the same path of decadence as the West. We are one step behind because paradoxically, communism preserved all the countries in the East from a certain moral decadence that is rampant in our West. But that means that they're catching up. I knew Poland just coming out of communism, and it was paradise from the moral point of view. Now it's going down the drain like any other country. Religious practice is still much higher than average European country, but it's going down. Well, Dugin, who has all the interest in promoting Russia and boasting about the morality in Russia, 2 days ago, he said, we are also going on the downslope. The only thing is that we are one step behind. So we have to take this very, very carefully.
We're talking with Mr. Julio Laredo. He is with Tradition, Family, and Property, talking about Our Lady of Fatima and Russia. We have about 3 minutes to break, Mr. Laredo. So let's think about, after the break, I want to get into the Pope's consecration. I want to ask you about that. But before we do that, Our Lady of Fatima, she asked for this, the consecration of Russia, and she wanted it done with all the bishops in union. Again, we'll talk more about that after the break. But I think what you just laid out, it has to lay out an argument that the consecration could not have happened, or else would we be seeing this?
That's a post hoc argument, which is true. If you assume that a cause is valid, you can judge it by its effects. If there are no effects, you at least have to raise the suspicion that the cause is not valid. And that's what we're seeing. There's no conversion whatsoever.
And not to mention the anti-Catholic sentiment in Russia still to this day.
Oh, that I can speak a lot about that, but that's rampant. The Catholic Church is persecuted in Russia today, and that's one of the things that would happen if Russia takes over Ukraine.
Well, it's interesting because we talk about Ukraine. I'm not a big fan of the Ukrainian government today. I'm very disturbed by a lot of the biolabs, that came out. It's like the knee-deep relationship between certain political actors in our country and in the West and the Ukrainian government. I feel for the people of Ukraine because I feel like they're, in many ways, they're caught like in the vice in some ways. So it's hard to know who to trust and what to believe. But so much of the debate that goes on on social media about these topics, it's black or white, and there's no gray zone. What would you say to that?
The thing is this. I ask you straightforward. Does Joe Biden represent the U.S.?
Unfortunately, yes.
Because he was elected. But does he represent the real American spirit?
No.
He represents, in a certain sense, an anti-America.
Yeah, but this is one of my complaints as an American citizen, as a voter, as a veteran. I don't get to vote what the CIA does. I don't get to vote what the State Department does. No matter what I vote or how I vote or any of the voters vote, the CIA and the State Department continue to do whatever they're going to do, and the American people get no say in that.
Exactly. Well, that is also in the Ukraine. So we have to go over that and see what the Ukrainian church wants, what the Ukrainian people want.
Yeah. And hold that thought. Sorry, Mr. Laredo. A very complicated issue, to be sure. And, one of the things I think about when it comes to our Fatima and the eras of Russia spreading across the world was, well, communism did spread. It spread to China, which still exists today and is in the process of a genocide of its people today, let alone the lies. And Putin has recently asked China to help, with material assistance and more. And I was watching some commentary of some expats who had lived in China for many, many years, and they were saying China is right now running the propaganda machine for Vladimir Putin and the Ukraine invasion. So they are assisting him right now with that. But we saw communism spread into Latin America. We're seeing its temperature, I would say, here in the United States. There's a great support now openly and publicly for socialism in our country. And it's kind of a frightening thing, but we do see the errors of Russia have spread across the world. What would you say to that?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, communism is not dead. It's alive and well, unfortunately. Take, for example, my country, in Peruvian. The last elections were won by the communist candidate. Last Sunday, the Colombian elections were won by a Marxist, Petro. So we see real life communists who follow Cuba, who follow North Korea, who follow China, etc., alive and well and governing Latin American countries, not to speak of all those other countries that you mentioned. So unfortunately, communism is alive and well. This communism hasn't been totally rejected in Russia, in the Russian Federation. Putin himself has said several times that he sympathizes with socialism and communism. It's curious that he makes this distinction, but he says it verbatim like this. He also said that he still has his membership card of the Soviet Communist Party, and he considers the Stalinist period a time of glory for Russia. So the errors of Russia, Soviet communism, are still very well alive in the Russian Federation today. Perhaps not in the name, perhaps not in the full ideology, but in the centralization of power and especially in the methods. But then there's another point. Already in the 1920s, the communists themselves began to prepare the next step, post-communism. We have the Frankfurt School, we have Antonio Gramsci here in Italy. They began to prepare the next step of the revolutionary process. Take, for example, the so-called sexual revolution. It was launched in 1936 by Wilhelm Reich, who comes from the Frankfurt School. He was a Marxist. And he launched the sexual revolution, and the book had a subtitle that was censored in the US, for the socialist restructuring of man. That is, sexual liberties, which we saw explode in the 1960s, they were intended as an element of a revolutionary process, as Wilhelm Reich said, for the socialist restructuring of man. Well, so the whole idea of a cultural revolution, the whole idea of the new proletariat, homosexuals as proletarians, feminists as proletarians, ethnic minorities as proletarians, etc., all that was perfectly planned already since the 1920s by the communists themselves. So what we're seeing today is, as I said, a survival of old-fashioned communism in so many countries, and it's regaining power in Latin America. And we also see this post-communism, which is one and the same with communism, only that much more advanced, which is what we are witnessing here in the West with the cultural, moral revolution. So unfortunately, the errors of Russia are still there.
That's fascinating, Mr. Laredo. You know, it's great to be able to look at all of the history that has happened so far from a very high perspective, and we tend to forget that there are still many seeds that are yet to sprout. But I'm wondering, you know, it took a long time for all of those errors to spread. How long do you anticipate the good fruits, if, let's say, for example, this consecration is the legitimate consecration and it happens in the express way that Our Lady asked for? How long do you think there would be results from this, or do you think it would be something instantaneous? This is something that we're debating here.
Things can happen very quickly and very deeply. I remember once in 1980s, we were walking in Rome, and I say we, TFP members, I was not in that group. And they were showing around this conservative Catholic leader who died some years ago, Paul Weyrich. We all know his name very well. And they were looking at the Fori Imperiali, at the ruins of the Roman Empire. The only thing that is left standing are the churches that were built on top of the Roman ruins. And they told me, Paul Weyrich, contemplating that, actually began to cry. And he said, yes, they were a great empire, the Roman Empire. Who would think that the great Roman Empire, intended to last for 1,000 years, would end up in ruins, and the only thing that would have left standing is the church? I mean, civilizations can come and go, and they can come and go very quickly. There's a Latin saying, motio in ultimo velociter, or velocior. I don't remember exactly the conjugation. Anyway, the motion, at the end is faster. The more we go toward the end, the faster things go. So things can change very deeply and very clearly. Now, does a consecration automatically, as they say in theology, ex opera operato, ipso facto, will produce this whole conversion? I don't think so. But it's a very, indeed, essential analysis elements of this conversion. Because what Our Lady in Fatima asked was for a total and deep conversion of modern man, rejecting all the errors that have brought us to where we are now in all the fields. Because if we leave one single error floating around somewhere, we will fall back into the same situation. Now, in this huge conversion, which we can see in the third part of the Secret of Fatima, which is a symbolic vision on this conversion, the consecration of Russia is a very important, indeed essential element.
Mr. Laredo, well, so what is your analysis of the situation that happened when Pope Francis came out and said he's going to be consecrating Russia, and then yesterday coming out and saying that he's inviting all the bishops to join in with him in consecrating Russia and Ukraine? What's your analysis of the situation of the consecration?
Well, as for the bishops, there was no mention of the bishops in the first communique the Vatican published 2 days ago, a couple of days ago, Wednesday afternoon. That was, I think, a spontaneous movement from bishops' conferences who are now joining in the effort. But originally, there was no mention of the bishops. Now, there had already been, and this is the direct cause, the immediate cause of this action, there had already been a request from the Ukrainian bishops, both Catholic Byzantine and Roman Catholic in Ukraine. And there had been a request also from the Russian bishops. You know, there are 4 Russian bishops, or 4 bishops in Russia, 4 dioceses, and they had asked for that. Now, it came as a surprise for everybody, but a surprise that was the consequence, I don't know if I'm using the expression well, as well wave, you know, this type of wave that grows under the surface and grows and grows and grows, but you don't see it. All of a sudden, it sort of bursts out of the surface, and it's a huge wave, and people can be shocked or surprised by this huge wave, but they don't perceive that it had been growing under the surface. I think that deep in modern man's head, Fatima is at the center. Whenever there is some situation which brings back the idea of a possible chastisement of some world war or something, immediately the souls and the minds turn to Fatima. So there was a huge swell wave growing under the surface. At a certain point, Pope Francis thought that it would be better to ride this wave and proclaim the consecration. Now, he will do the consecration within another ceremony, which is the penitential ceremonies of this Friday. It's Lent Friday. and there are penitential ceremonies, which basically means confessions in the Vatican. We would have liked, as Fatima devotes, we would have liked a solemn ceremony in the Vatican. Now, the second point is that he's consecrating Ukraine and Russia, sort of asking for peace. We all want peace. But more than one analyst has pointed out this, that by consecrating both countries, he's putting the emphasis more on the peace than on the actual conversion of Russia. And then all his relationship with the Patriarchate of Moscow, with Kirill, the meeting he had with Kirill in Cuba, in Havana, etc., raised some questions, some problems.
We'll have to leave it there. I'm sorry, Mr. Laredo, but we are out of time. We've come to the end, but God love you, Mr. Laredo. Thank you for your time today. We are linking to your talk. We encourage everybody to check it out. Did Russia convert? But great commentary and input. God bless you. God love you. Have a great day. All right, that's going to do it.
And God bless you.
That is going to do it for hour number 1 of Catholic Drive Time.